No, no, no. Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and a happy welcome to our session on the naked truth, social media censorship of sexual health information and advocating to big tech for change. We will start the session with an activity that Jackie Rotman from Center for Intimacy Justice will host.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this session. We're going to start with an activity, and we want you to guess which of these Facebook and Instagram ads were rejected or accepted. 75% of women report experiencing pain with intimacy at some point. Raise your hand if you think this ad was accepted. Okay, raise your hand if you think it was rejected. Those who said rejected were correct. That advertisement was rejected. So 75% of women who experience pain couldn't access it. Get hard, stay hard. Accepted? You are correct. This advertisement for HIMS, for erectile dysfunction drugs, has been accepted since essentially the inception of that company in 2017. You'll start to get the pattern. Many have grabbed their spots for our breastfeeding workshop this week. This is an ad for parenting education, or breastfeeding education for new parents. Accepted or rejected? Correct. Ball hair manscaping. We save balls. This one gets me the hardest. This was an ad for Love Matters Kenya about consent. And unfortunately, this was rejected. So people are lacking information about consent and safe and healthy sex. So anyway, let's just let that sink in, because this was the one that made me the most angry when I learned about it. We have a lot to change. Level up your solo time as seen in Men's Health. Lotion for male masturbation, you can probably guess, was accepted. So these are some of the issues we're going to be talking about in terms of the cultural effects and the health and economic effects of this type of content moderation that we believe is discriminatory on many other dimensions in addition to gender. And to summarize, these were some of the ads that our organization, Center for Intimacy Justice, shared that were all rejected. These are from a January 2022 report that we released on this issue. And all of these are Facebook and Instagram platforms. And this is a summary of ads that are allowed on those platforms. We'll talk more about those policies in detail. The one that says "get hard" or "get your money back" is a slogan that is very commonly used. There's lots of different ads with that slogan that is allowed, and yet these sexual health and reproductive health ads are not allowed. I'll briefly summarize a couple of stats, and then we're going to go into a discussion and hear from others. But just to share how pervasive this is, our organization did a study and found that of 60 women's health or female health related nonprofits and innovative technology startups that we studied, 100% of the 60 had their ads rejected by Facebook or Instagram, and 50% had their entire account suspended at some point in time. 100%. So every single entrepreneur and team and staff member I've talked with in this space has said that they have difficulty getting their advertisements through. And this is a huge public health issue and societal issue. So thank you so much for coming to this session. And I'm going to turn it over to Sarabi to share more about R&W Media's research. I'm sorry, to Alexandra.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for that presentation. My name is Alexandra Landquist, and I will be the moderator of this discussion today. I lead communications and partnerships at the Case for Her. We're a philanthropic investment portfolio investing in key women's health issues of menstruation, sexual health and pleasure, and safe abortion through grants, investments, convenings, and advocacy. I'm thrilled to introduce our distinguished panelists who are absolute trailblazers in this space. Vidika Yadav is a human rights professional, trainer, and social entrepreneur. She has worked on sexual rights and gender rights issues around the world. She's the co-founder of Love Matters India, India's leading digital initiative on sexual and reproductive health and rights for young people. She's also the founder of Teen Book, India's first comprehensive digital CSC resource hub for adolescents, teenagers, parents, and educators. She is one of the top 120 under 40 new generation of family planning leaders and has featured in the award-winning documentary #Female Pleasure. She serves as the chair of the Global Advocacy Board on Sexual Health and Well-being. Surabhi Srivastava has nearly 10 years of experience in nonprofit sector with a focus on advancing young people's sexual and reproductive health and rights using digital media, platforms, and campaigns. She currently works at R&W Media in the Netherlands, where she manages various digital sexuality education programs in collaboration with global and regional partners. Surabhi is from Mumbai, India, and holds an MPH degree from Yale University and an MA degree in social policy from the International Institute of Social Studies in The Hague. Jackie Rotman is the founder and CEO of Center for Intimacy Justice, an organization working to change digital discrimination and censorship towards sexual and reproductive health. Center for Intimacy Justice recently saw a win with Meta revisiting its policy towards sexual and reproductive health ads after CIJ released an investigation in the New York Times and 75 media outlets about Meta systematically rejecting ads for female health. Jackie holds a master's in public administration from Harvard Kennedy School, master's in business administration from Stanford, and BA with University Distinction in Public Policy from Stanford. She's been a social entrepreneur since the age of 14 when she founded her first nonprofit focused on dance education for youth. Now, I would like for our panelists to introduce the organization they are representing and what their focus is to advance change within social media censorship. Vidika, would you like to start?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the panel today. For Love Matters India is India's leading sexual and reproductive health and rights digital initiative for young people, which is bilingual in English and Hindi, and it's absolutely free of cost, and young people access information that they need. We provide open, honest, non-judgmental, and pleasure-positive information to young people, which they can access wherever they are through their mobile phones. And well, we work at the intersection of media and public health, and of course, we have thriving communities on social media. And what we're going to talk about today, censorship, is something that has been a living reality for us for past 10 years. So lots of examples and lots of experience, sort of producing content, of putting it online, and of course, advocating with the big tech and online gatekeepers around what good sexual and reproductive health and information is and what should be available to people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidika. Jackie, would you like to go?
Sure. Center for Intimacy Justice has been in the last year and a half working on this issue, starting with Meta's policy, which we'll talk about how we saw a win after engaging a lot of policymakers and the media in calling out this issue that was previously unknown to much of the public. We are next focusing on TikTok, Google, Amazon, and other tech platforms taking on the digital censorship, and we have a network of hundreds of organizations and businesses that are a part of a coalition on this issue. Hope to engage many of your organizations and you in this very collective, meaningful work. And our team member, Carol, is here as well, so you can also talk with her about our organization.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Surabhi?
Hi, everyone. Great to see all of you here, and really amazing to be part of this panel. RNW Media is an international digital media organization. We are a nonprofit that works at the intersection of digital media and digital rights. So we look at a lot of different issues from the perspective of digital rights and are really strongly committed to advancing digital rights of young people. And I specifically work on digital sexuality education initiatives and look at the intersection of digital rights, media, and sexuality education. We believe in power of partnerships, and we work with and for young people to create digital communities for social change. And we have an amazing network of partners around the world. We have, including Love Matters Global Network members, and we have over 23 digital communities around the world with 19 country member partners in the RNW Media Network. And I'll be happy to talk more about our work later on in the discussion.
Thank you so much, Surabi. We will now move on to a presentation of findings from Surabi on RNW Media's recent report, Social Media Censorship of Sexual and Reproductive Health Ads.
Okay, I hope I'm audible to everyone. Yeah, as I mentioned, in fact, we have a global network of members around the world. And actually, we now have 19 members working in over 20 countries, running 23 digital communities of young people. And the Love Matters community has over combined 10 million followers. And Vitika will talk a bit more about Love Matters and how it intersects with the issue of online censorship during the discussion we have later. So I was at a session this morning at 7 a.m. Where we were talking about the future of comprehensive sexuality education. And I think there was a consensus there that the that future of sexuality education is, if not fully digital, is partly digital at least. And so there's really a need to talk about digital sexuality education and how we reach young people, because most young people are online. And it really demands attention then. What are the issues that intersect with digital rights of young people in that sense, right? So whether it's censorship, whether it's mis and disinformation, whether it's access to internet, reliable connectivity, all of those issues are also intersecting with when we talk about digital sexuality education. And in terms of, I think, mis and disinformation and censorship, we have seen a lot more discussion around political issues, given what's happening both in global north and south. But there's been not a lot of discussion around how these issues impact or intersect with sexuality education. And so the attempt of this session is also to focus and bring to light why it's important that when we talk about comprehensive sexuality education, we must not forget talking about digital rights of young people. So with RNW Media and our Love Matters Global Network members, which included Love Matters India, Kenya, China, Egypt, Love Matters DRC, and Nigeria, we conducted a research to look at, a lot of these platforms use Facebook as the primary way of reaching young people for various SRH information. And we wanted to assess the information that they were putting on these Facebook platforms, whether it was being rejected by Facebook. And a lot of them, I think before I jump to what happens, I also want to emphasize that the business model of these tech companies, it's not necessarily conducive to talking about education, right? Especially SRH information. And we see that the platforms change algorithms, and that leads to less organic reach for organizations to be able to push their content and reach young people. And so there is an incentive to also invest in ads, right? And so to build on that inorganic reach, you have to invest in ads. But then the ads get rejected, and you're not able to then reach young people. So it's sort of like a vicious cycle, which keeps on repeating. And it's really interesting how the tech platforms are built in a way that they are not necessarily supportive of the initiatives that these amazing platforms are running to empower young people. So from 2015 until October 2022, we found that a total of over 2,000 ads that were running across these 6 Love Matters platforms were rejected. And you can also see with this trend line that there's been a huge drop in accepted ads overall on these platforms. And we found that over 1 out of 3 ads were being rejected by Facebook. And just to be mindful, this is just Facebook. We are not talking about other Meta platforms, so not WhatsApp or Instagram, just Facebook for now. And the other thing we found was if one ad was rejected on a particular topic, there was also more likelihood for other ads on similar topics to be rejected for similar reasons. So we see that cycle being repeated again. From 2015 to 2020, we also saw that over 1,000 ads, so the aggregate number that I shared before is part of this. We saw over 1,500 ads, SRHR ads, were rejected by Facebook. And the reasons given often, and I should say they were miscategorized as, over 45% were miscategorized as adult products and services, over 20% for adult content, and over 12% or 13% for disruptive, low-quality content. So these are usually the reasons if you have interacted with these mediums in your own work, and we'd love to hear more from your own experience if you have faced censorship on digital platforms that you use. We often find that there's not a detailed reason given by Facebook for these rejection of ads. We usually just get, this was low-quality content, or you get an inscription saying adult products and service, right? That's about it. So these are the categories that have been put together by Facebook. There's not much information on how these categories have been put together, who has been involved in the process of deciding or exemplifying these categories. So it's really, really opaque in that sense. So that was more the quantitative part of the study, but we also did qualitative research with members of Love Matters platforms to understand what are some challenges that are not reflected necessarily in these statistics, right? So one of the other things we found from talking to editors at Love Matters platforms was that they felt that this increased and repetitive rejection of ads also actually led to blocking of the accounts itself. And that's a huge loss to the community, the digital community that you've actually put together. There's a lot of investment, time, money that goes into that. And if blocking of ads actually leads to blocking of your content, that's a big loss. And then you have to overall actually start from scratch. An important thing to also consider is self-censorship. So we found that a lot of editors or content creators who work on creating these content on digital platforms mentioned that because they didn't really want to deal with this anymore of constantly ads being rejected, they were not willing to talk about a few topics that they knew were more likelihood or were more bound to get rejected by Facebook. And that's a really, I think, problematic and chilling observation, because we want, and these platforms really believe in sharing pleasure positive information on SRH, and it's young people's right to access this information in online and offline spaces. But if content creators are self-censoring, it's a very ominous sign for what's to come in the future. So it's really important that we also look at how this self-stigmatization and self-censorship impacts in relation to online censorship of content. And of course, I think as Jackie had mentioned earlier too, and maybe most of you are aware, Meta recently updated their advertising policy on Facebook. And they have been more welcoming of SRH information, but we see that pleasure is still the missing big element. They have explicitly mentioned that pleasure positive content is not something that they're willing to open doors to yet. And so there's still a lot more work to be done. And denying young people pleasure positive information is, it's anathema to what comprehensive sexuality education is meant for. We also saw that there were mitigation strategies, and I think as content creators or people working with on digital platforms, you use these yourselves. People use creative ways to tackle the censorship, right? So they might use different words, they might use images that are less likely to be censored or rejected by Facebook. But of course, we have to be mindful that this means that we are not necessarily giving access to direct, accurate information always to young people. And while these strategies can be helpful and we can still get the word out about the content that matters and young people need to hear about, it does dilute in some ways the impact and efficacy of what can be done if we were more explicit about what we were trying to do. And impact of, so, I mean, and then the two big things that I want to talk about is also impact on young people, as I mentioned before. We are denying young people access to accurate, pleasure-positive information on SRH issues. And as one of our editors from Love Matters Kenya mentioned, in fact, in the Kenyan constitution, that is outlined as an explicit right of young people. But if the tech platforms are not able to, help us implement and put that in practice, that's a big abrogation of young people's rights. And I think it's also impacting young people in the sense that there's no guidance for them to understand how can or where can they access information that they need, and more explicitly, how can they really interact with young people to ensure that they have access to information that is needed for them to secure their SRH and rights, and also to access services. And I think I want to mention this specifically because I think we haven't mentioned or talked a lot about what happens to humans behind the machine, right? And I think that's a topic of discussion that needs to happen more and more. Content creators are spending a lot of time, investing a lot of time in creating this content, keeping up with algorithms, keeping up with the trends on social media, and dealing with censorship online. But have we focused enough of our attention on what's happening to digital content creators? The pressure, the stress, the mental health toll it takes on content creators, I think that really needs to be brought into the space as well as we talk about future of CSE, as we talk about digital sexuality education. And we agree that mental health is an important part of comprehensive sexuality education. So we also must really focus on how do we address challenges that mental health impact has on digital content creators. Role of Meta, I think Jackie will talk a bit more about it as well as Withika, but just to put it very quickly, there is a lack of transparency in policies, and I'm sure you are aware of this. This is not new. There is a very complicated appeals process, a lot of opaqueness around how to interact with these tech platforms to understand what went wrong, how to address that. And also, given what's happened with Meta recently with the big layoffs, we don't know how that might actually even impact the implementation of the recent ad update policy that's taken place, or what impact it has on moderation of these online spaces that Meta runs. These are some solutions that came out of the qualitative research that we did with folks at Love Matters platforms. One of the, and we can talk a bit more about this later, but one of the suggestions I think actually came from Vitika was to whitelist organizations. So make sure that there's a process to identify which organizations are actually doing work on promoting sexuality education and using content for educational purposes, and having some kind of maybe a blue tick like that's on Twitter, although that's not a good example anymore. But perhaps Mark Zuckerberg would not be inspired from that. But yeah, just to say that there's a way or process to identify that there are organizations and individual content creators doing more educational work. A validation panel to understand why ads get rejected and what needs to be done in order to then streamline the process and expedite the process to get the content back on tech platforms. Continued advocacy, I'll let Jackie talk more about this, but also to think about advocacy with governments, right? We come through from various contexts where there are censorship laws on the books as well by the local governments. And if these tech companies are operating within these very specific local contexts, and they always have a way to hide behind the laws on the book in the national context, we also need to then continue to advocate with our governments to make censorship a thing of the past and to really try and address in the domain of sexuality education. And last thing I want to, I think, leave you with is that why is it important to talk about this issue? Because we know that lack of information and or accessing inaccurate information on SRHR can and does cost lives. So this has very real life implications. We have seen that in the political domain with what happened in January 6th or in other parts of the world in Myanmar. So we really, really want to make sure that censorship, misinformation, disinformation are tackled in online spaces, especially as the blurring of online and offline increases in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Surabi, for highlighting the injustices of this issue and the implications on young adults and our global population. Based on what we just heard, I'm very keen for our audience to learn more on Love Matters India's perspective on this issue regarding our younger audience. So, Vidika, what is the impact of censorship on young people trying to access content and content creators?
I think Surabhi has covered quite a lot in terms of what censorship, perhaps, sort of the implications of censorship on young people and how they're accessing information. I will actually just quickly start with a video, just letting people know what we do at Love Matters across different regions and the fact that we give out information that is censored and the implications that it has.
Your first crush, the first time you fell in love, the first time you had a orgasm. What about the first time you thought the condom broke? Who did you tell? Your friends? Parents? What about a nurse or a doctor if you had the services available? But what if talking about love, sex and relationships in your society was taboo? Who would you have turned to? Love Matters provides information on sexual health and gender rights for young people, information they can access directly from their mobile phones. We nurture vibrant communities that learn from and support each other. Our partnerships ensure that bridges are built between young people and the services they need. Most importantly, we empower young people to take control of their sexual health and claim their right to sexual pleasure. But we can't do it alone. You can help us support young people in times of crisis and share their happiness in times of joy. Because love matters.
Thank you. I also have my colleague from Love Matters Arabic, Nora. A big shout out to you as well. I think the work that we are collectively doing is helping young people around the globe access information that they need so that they do not suffer in shame. There's a lot of young people are in need of information. And of course, what we saw out there was if you do not have people, if you do not have safe spaces, if you feel you cannot really speak to a friend or your parents or other people in the community about questions you may have about issues you might be facing, then you're just left to, sort of suffer in shame and silence rather than actually have information that can help you connect with people and also access services. And that is exactly the work that we do at Love Matters. We're trying to speak to young people, but also help them support each other. And for that, we use social media communities where we are not only talking about issues, but we are encouraging young people to support each other, to have these conversations, and perhaps work towards a world where everybody feels supported. We young people feel that they have information that can help them take informed decisions. So when information is taken down, when they do not have information that they possibly need to have, we see a lot of implications. We see teenage pregnancies, we see unwanted sexual contact. We see a lot of those situations which can lead to a lot of pain and hurt and regret. And of course, when we talk about female sexuality, when we talk about pleasure, we're not even investing enough in helping young people acknowledge their own bodies, their own sexuality, but also how to talk about your own pleasure, how to negotiate pleasure in a relationship, how to be healthy. So I think the implications are many. And I think most importantly, when we talk about a future that is healthier, are we really moving strongly towards that? We're talking about thriving communities and we're talking about partnerships and social, when we talk about big tech, these partnerships are extremely important because social media are spaces which help amplify good information. And we need to be able to use these platforms and also hold them accountable for how they're operating. And I think for that, what we need is healthier internet, which, again, I think the policies at this point of time is what I would say non-sexy policies. I mean, we are not in the business of selling car insurance, right? We're going to talk about sex, and we want to do it in a way that is fun, that is sexy, that is healthy, and we make it desirable. We want to make good sex desirable, and for that, we need to use formats, pictures, language that is fun, that is sexy, that is engaging. So I think we need to just, I think big tech really needs to know that we know how to communicate, and perhaps they need to acknowledge what we know and help us tell them and teach them some ways in which they can support. And of course, again, I think in this, we need support of different organizations, and also in the process, educate young people to do that together with us. Today, we have far more SRHR content creators than ever before. So we have also, in a way, I suppose, created a demand. Young people want to create content that resonates with them and that can help support each other. And in that, I mean, if there is censorship, if the content that they create is taken down, they really question about what they are possibly, sort of capable of doing. And it sort of has implications on not only on their own lives, but I think lives of other people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidika. And on that note, with empowering young adolescents with the use of social media, I want to move on and talk about advocacy. As we all know, advocacy is an impactful and integral tool to drive change in causes we care about. So I would like to hear from Jackie Rotman. Could you talk about the work that has been done to change these policies, and what progress have we seen so far?
So for many years, this was an issue affecting so many people, but nothing had changed on the policy side. And this year, we've been able to see changes for the first time, and for the first time in a significant way. And we've also gotten a lot of allies, including like former presidential candidates and other senators in the US speaking out about this issue, which has been really exciting. I'll talk more about some of the specifics, and I'll also say that all of that has been a collaboration between all the organizations you're seeing here and so many others of you. So it's been a really valuable example of effective partnership and collaboration that we'll talk more about. I just want to, we're gonna use, yeah, perfect, we're gonna use some of the slides. So just a little bit of a timeline, the statistics that I shared earlier about how 60 companies and nonprofits we looked at, of them, 100% of them had been rejected. We shared that information in an investigation, and we published it in January of this year. And having that collective information was so valuable because people had experienced differences in experienced this in silos, but we were able to come together and show the public in a very compelling story what was happening and why it mattered. So we released this investigation, the New York Times covered it, and since then 75 different media outlets have covered it. And from the power of that media strategy, some of the things that happened afterward completely organically were a US Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee took that research and 2 weeks later cited it and submitted an open letter to Mark Zuckerberg and Meta requiring them to answer questions. They launched a private investigation by Congress into this issue, which was really exciting and was led by the chair of the committee, Senator Patty Murray. And then, completely to our surprise, in February, Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State in the United States, tweeted at the senator asking, just curious, has there been any updates? And there was a 5 or 6 or so tweet long conversation exchange between the senator and the president, the senator and the former presidential candidate about this issue. Like I'm dreaming in another place. That was so meaningful because so many entrepreneurs who had felt unseen felt seen by this exchange. It mattered, and it was a win that fueled our spirits. And then, completely to our surprise, 10 months later, we were just sending a link to Facebook's policy to Alexandra's team member, Christina, at the Case for Her, and noticed that the policy had quietly become different at Meta. So um, they revised their adult products and services policy and also their nudity policy. And we can talk more about some of the specifics maybe later in the conversation, but the policy was more clear that sexual and health and wellness ads are meant to be allowed. There's still a lot of issues with them. They cited examples of categories that the Meta is saying is allowed. It's the first time that they specifically wrote that sex education as one category was allowed. They'd never mentioned sex education in the policy. They specifically said that the sex education can't talk about pleasure, which is another topic we can talk more about. And they also added other examples of health categories that were these same exact examples as those in our report that they're now saying are allowed. So that was some of the update this year, and it's been, like I said, really exciting to work together to have a coalition to, in an innovative way, use philanthropic capital and government funding and nonprofit partnerships to see that change. But it's just the beginning, and there's a lot more change that's needed.
Thank you so much, Jackie, and congratulations to Meta rewriting some of their ad policies. It's a great step in the right direction, but we're not there yet. I want to hear from all of you. What more needs to be done to change this? And what can people in this room do? If I'm an avid supporter of women's health, SRHR, pleasure, young adolescents, menstrual health, how can I, on a personal level, get involved? Because I think the time is right. The time is now. So, Surabi, do you want to?
Yeah, I think this space has actually really been useful and exciting at the same time to understand what are the challenges that are being faced by various other content creators, you know, whether you're affiliated with an organization, whether you're an independent content creator. And I've been listening to a lot more stories, even beyond Facebook, right? And so I think Jackie had mentioned earlier at the opening that there is more research needed as well to do this experience sharing, to understand what's happening on platforms like TikTok or Instagram, and even the ones that we don't know of yet, but are, you know, becoming more popular with young people. So I think it's going to be a continuous, like, evolving process in that sense to have as much evidence generation as possible as part of these conversations. I also want to emphasize the power of partnerships in this. A lot of us who are, I mean, all of us sitting in this panel have been partners and collaborators on this research. And I think there's room for a lot more collaborators to come in and listen from young people, youth-led organizations, but also other organizations working on CSE. And also, I think, inter-movement dialogue, which I find there's a lot more work that needs to be done, especially between digital rights movement, comprehensive sexuality education movement, SRHR movement, to understand what are the point of, or the touch points that we can connect with and advocate in spaces that perhaps we are not there, but can take up space and collectively do that advocacy. So I think it's really important to also have that inter-movement dialogue. And I think just yesterday we were talking a bit more about you know, taking up spaces and conferences that are more frequented by, let's say, digital rights activists who don't traditionally talk about SRH information. But if we bring an intersectional lens and look at, can we understand how online misinformation, disinformation is you know, being experienced by SRHR content creators? Or can we look at how censorship is being experienced? Can we look at how algorithm and, you know, AI learning, machine learning is impacting SRHR information dissemination? I think there are a lot of different touch points that can be explored and collaborated on. So I definitely think there's a lot of power in that inter-movement dialogue that needs to happen.
Thank you so much, Surabi. Would Jackie or Vidika like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I just, I mean, I feel all of us have the power to be positive disruptors, and I think it's high time that we disrupt this space in two ways. One, we have to create a, you know, sort of a manifesto sort of thing where all of us can demand what we want, right? We have to make the consumer base, and for that, it sort of needs to be a movement, a revolution in itself. So it is not just about people sitting in this room or people who are associated and working on SRHR, but it has to go beyond that, right? So we have to sort of create a movement that resonates with everyone. And I mean, I feel that there's a lot of potential also in terms of what perhaps can challenge the present big tech. I mean, I think there would also be, we also want to invest in design, in platforms that are intelligent by design, that look at some of these issues, from the design perspective. And perhaps what we need is a metaverse of our own, something that challenges what is present in, in the present world. So I think we are also limited in some ways, I feel, by what we can do with these platforms. I think we also need to go beyond that and see that, do we limit ourselves to what this is, or do we go beyond that and create a metaverse of our own? Thank you.
I love that, alternatives to these platforms as well. I always love speaking with groups, especially people like you who are experts and active in sexual and reproductive health rights, because my hope is that when we walk out of this room, every single person has an idea for how we can collaborate. This work is only effective collectively, and so every single one of you can be a part of this, and I'll share specific ways, a few examples of specific ways that all of you can get involved. I also want to say when we talk about next steps, a lot of the strategies I'll share are about how we can specifically change tech policies, but all of this is so couched in our cultural change. Meta's policy that states that pleasure ads are not allowed and yet allows the ads that all of you saw for Get Hard or Get Your Money Back is completely is synonymous with the culture that we have today. And the ads that are and are not allowed to be seen affect that culture, and what's not allowed to be seen is synchronous with the culture that we already live in. And so we're continuing digital discrimination work to specifically change tech policies, but at Center for Intimacy Justice, we're also expanding our culture change work, trying to get more stories and more stories published, trying to get really amazing film partnerships to tell stories of activists like many of you here, and shift the culture around pleasure, around agency, around sexual rights, because the culture change and the tech policy change are completely in conversation with each other. Before, I want to focus on what every one of you can do and a few ideas, but briefly I can share a little bit about what some of our next steps are. So Meta has changed its policy, but we already know that in practice, the algorithms are still rejecting ads that they're saying are allowed. We haven't seen a significant change in what's happening. So the policy change is important and shows that there was some amount of being heard, but in actually enforcing and executing this policy, there's a lot more to do. And what we've seen is press pressure has gotten Meta to make some changes, but when it comes to really forcing algorithmic change and change in execution, we are open to as much partnership as we can with government actors that have the ability to force Meta's hand. So we're partnering in the US we're educating state attorneys general that are represent each state and can oversee advertising. And we're also, we'd love all of your involvement, filing a Federal Trade Commission complaint. It's a US federal agency, but has the impact that can be global because this is a global policy. So we're advocating the government to create changes. I'll go through these quickly. And then we're having more op-eds and culture change around how we can push Meta further, including on some of the areas that they're still saying are not allowed. We will also be doing research on TikTok, Google, Amazon, and others, releasing that in 2023, sharing that as widely as we can, hopefully with all of you. And we'll have communication campaigns to share all that information. And then lastly, for my answer for this, just here's a few ways that all of you can get involved. And of course, there are others. The first is that when we collectively share this research in 2023 on 4 or more platforms, we want to be able to have 600 plus, hundreds of organizations in a coordinated way, having a campaign with hashtags like keep your algorithms off my body or say the C word, censorship, or other ideas, so that we can collectively raise attention to this issue. We also have, sorry, I feel like we also have a membership program where whether you're a nonprofit, a company, or a philanthropic entity, we can pool our resources together in support of change. And we want to hear your examples of censorship so that we can incorporate that, tell your story in our research bodies, and be able to promote them. So sharing your evidence, joining our communications campaigns, and becoming a member of this work like those on the stage are 3 of the ways you can get involved. And of course, there are others as well.
Thank you all so much. I think what you really touched upon, all of you, is the importance of partnerships. And we do see an accelerated focus, even at this conference, in the general dialogue on the importance of developing partnerships rather than working in silos beside each other. So how have you seen successful partnerships in this space? And what partnerships are you currently looking to make? Would you want to go, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I would say as RNW Media, we are quite well placed at that intersection I was talking about, we are in spaces where people are talking about digital rights. We are in spaces where people are talking about CSE. And we're also in places where increasingly young people are using digital media as a way to accelerate social change. So we occupy all of those spaces, but I think having more organizations join us in those spaces, having funders and donors understand what is the importance of funding those interdisciplinary, intersectional spaces is also very important. So I think my call to action would really be that we need to start thinking about this as an intersectional issue, and then and really look at beyond the more traditional partnerships that we look at, how can we involve, maybe even like, I think when Jackie was talking, I was thinking about, can we work with coders and developers who work on AI to make systems that are preventing such censorship of SRH information, right? So really thinking about maybe wild creative ideas that are able to combine the two passions that we have in terms of making sure that SRHR information gets out to young people, but also that using these digital mediums are empowering both for us as content creators, but also for young people.
Thank you so much. Would Jackie and Vidika want to add anything?
Yes. I think adding to what Surbi has already shared, again, looking at partnerships which are with the more unusual networks, we often the private sector investment, the product lines that we are looking at. I think all of those need to be a part of these partnerships, and we have to look beyond. Perhaps just the SRHR network that we look at currently, because we're looking at big change, and that would come when we are working with schools and universities and youth networks and young people and private companies, just everybody coming together, because also at this point of time, we also need to understand, and you made this point around culture, which is more to do with challenging the social norms, our own biases and values. And I think we are all speaking about comprehensive sexuality education in different ways, and that is shaped by the context that we come from. So unless we have the same language, we cannot probably have the, really move forward in terms of partnerships where everybody is advocating for the same thing and wants the same thing. Thank you.
I'm encouraging Alexandra to speak on this because the organization she works with, The Case for Her, has been essential to all of the wins that you saw. It would not have happened without her team. So I'll share after you, but definitely speak to how you see this.
Okay. Putting me on the spot. No, but I think, three of you sitting here are fantastic examples of the power of partnership. And The Case for Her, we were one of the initial funders of Center for Intimacy Justice. And there is a strong need for funding in this space. And funders can connect with each other and spread the initiatives that we're working on together and join the cause collectively. Without funders, it's really hard to move this movement forward. So I'm doing a little call to action, but please, if there's any funders in this space, consider joining this cause, because it's changing the way we are handling social media today. the work that these women have been doing is so impactful and so important. And we need to step up. We really need to. So funding is integral, and having funders that understand the perspective also of women's health, of SRHR, of menstrual health, of all of these intersectionalities, it's so important. So really, please join us if you have, the interest, or spread the word so we all can, change the meta policies or all policies on this issue.
If I can also invite our colleague from Love Matters Arabic, Nora is here. If you'd like to share your experience as well.
You can come up here too, whichever.
Actually, I was thinking about also engaging Meta. Like it's also, if we have Meta here in the conversation, we have people who put this policy. We don't have to educate them about the processes or what we are doing, and have them on board in this conversation, because I'm wondering how many women are putting these policies, and we need to engage them. And also, I was wondering about. You talk about the self-censorship that we do to produce our content, but also we receive a censorship from the community that we are serving, right? So there is a lot of resistance of what we are doing, and we reach back to Meta, we reach back to Instagram saying that it's about what, and then we don't receive. So also there is a need of way of verification also from our sides of what's happening before removing those content, because other than this, we will not able to produce what we want to do. And then I was wondering about, like, can we do a low case lawsuit about against Meta, asking them for compensation for the money and the effort that a lot of our team here are putting to produce a graphic, to produce a content, and then out of nowhere we receive like this content, this picture have been removed without even a verification, without even having the power to say like this is clarifying our situation. So I think they had to pay at some point all the effort of the paid work that we did, and then we were not able to achieve result because that was just being bold by Meta. And I'm worried also about the monopoly that's happening for Twitter, of course. And I think it should be Twitter be one of the conversation, because now we're having someone deciding over Twitter what it will be, how it will be, and who can speak on it, and who will be verified and who will not be verified. So I'm worried about also the conversation about this and online, who will dictate the conversation online, to have you as based again companies dictating our own voice in our own community to say what we want to say. It's really hard to be having all those barriers and also having a resistance in community. Thank you.
Do you? No?
One of us will say
Okay.
yeah. I can just, thank you so much for that. You have such expertise, and I'm excited to have your voice and also hear more about your censorship experiences. Yeah, just echoing all of that. I can speak briefly to the lawsuit piece of it. That's so smart. And we've been really passionate about looking at law as a force of taking our power and what laws we can take, what legal actions we can take. So we've researched 4 different legal avenues. One of them was we've looked at, could we take private legal action in a lawsuit? And there are grounds to be able to, this is off the record, a conversation about the legal strategy, but we could sue under discrimination grounds. You could sue under consumer protection grounds. There's a law in the United States called Section 230 that gives tech companies immunity and makes it more challenging to sue them for what's on their platforms. So it takes novel legal approaches to get around that. But that law, Section 230, is going to be revisited by the Supreme Court that's hearing 2 cases on it in 2023 and could affect the legal arguments potentially on this issue. And then what we're doing right now is asking government agencies to sue Facebook about the issue. So the Federal Trade Commission is one agency that can sue Facebook under the FTC Act around deceptive advertising. And then also states can sue them, and there can be restitution in certain regions. So it's tricky, but legal action is certainly an area that is so important. On the other, yeah, I think on the other points you made about Twitter and others, I feel like your expertise was already clear from those.
I just want to add to this that let us not forget fighting legal cases would require money, which we don't have. Okay. So we need funders
Join us.
and many more funders because I think it's important and we need to set an example. But let's not forget everything takes time and money and effort. And it doesn't come for free. Thank you.
Can I, this is going back, or this was, I had a comment about what you said about partnerships and sharing some of our stories. I wanted to share a little bit about some of the history of how people came together on this issue, including organizations on this stage. So the Case for Her, we began funding Center for Intimacy Justice's work about 2 years ago when this was just an idea and some research. And they've provided high-risk philanthropic capital. They also do impact investing. The Case for Her, which has a funding arm, one of their multiple areas is women's pleasure. So they're the only philanthropists I know on the planet who specifically publicly have female pleasure as a part of their philanthropic strategy, which is so incredible. They also support the Pleasure Project that's in this room and PSI that does a lot of pleasure-focused work. So they've been integral partners, and they've also gotten a lot of other donors to write large anonymous checks, and then there will soon be a not anonymous one that hopefully we can announce soon that they have activated as collectives getting other funders on board. And then I also just want to share some of the story that R&W Media reached out to us in spring of 2021 and began funding this work supported by the Dutch government. I don't know if we have anybody from, they might not be in this room, but there's a 5-year partnership with the Dutch government is having some of that funding go toward this work. And so it's definitely been a collaborative effort of multiple organizations that came together. And this stage represents impact investing and philanthropy with Case for Her, and then NGOs, both internationally and focused on India, with Love Matters India and Love Matters Arabic as well. So having multiple hats to address the issue, including government funding and others, is important.
Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to move on to our Q&A. So if anybody have any questions, we can play. Yeah? Okay. Great.
Oh, there's a mic up there,
yeah. So everybody who has a question, maybe you can go up and stand in a line behind the mic.
We could take like multiple and then answer them.
Yeah. We could also take multiple and then answer them afterwards.
Hello. Oh, okay. Hi. Yeah, so I have 2 solutions that I don't hear talked about enough that I'd be really keen to hear your thoughts on. And the first is I would really like to hear more specific detail about how you work with content creators and how you might recommend other groups work with content creators based on what you've done. I'm an example of a creator who does make through. I get through. I've had suppression. I've had trouble with both TikTok and Twitter as platforms with sexual and reproductive right content, but I'm also someone who's had organic reach. I've had 130 million TikTok views. I've managed, but you'd be really shocked how few organizations have ever gotten in touch with me to make content about sex ed or about my work, which is journalism fighting sex misinformation. I've once been asked by an NGO to be an ambassador. I can't tell you how many sex toy companies get in touch with me and consumer brands want to pay me to post content. But I've never had foundations, civil society organizations, and I just think there's a huge gap there. So if anyone here is thinking of going to content creators, think about it. I was at a PR conference recently and I said to them, what content creators do you have on your media lists? Are you only sending stuff to journalists when actually that's not going to get through to young people? You could be sending people like me press releases, and we could send your content, we could send your research viral. So I'd be keen to hear a little bit more detail on that. And secondly, in the UK, research done by Cambridge and by Jigsaw, who I think are part of Google, right? I think someone here might know better, but they did research that found that if they use ad space on YouTube to address and fight popular myths. I believe they did it around COVID-19. They were able to essentially inoculate social media users from misinformation they would later encounter. Can you imagine a world where like social media platforms use their ad space to do a similar thing but for debunking sex myths? And can we make more demands of how social platforms use their ad spaces for social good? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Do we want to take another question and then we can go on to the answer?
And comments are welcome too, in addition to questions, hearing your experiences.
Okay, so basically I was asking two questions. The first one was around, because we spoke a bit on CSC as a possibility. So the current CSC curriculum doesn't have a digital component to it, but it is based on principles of citizenship, which I understand, right? So how would you see like these curriculums also have a component on, say, digital literacy and censorship? Because this is also a non-issue in the SRHR space, which we are, talking here right now. And since what we are hearing that there are no funds allocated in that space, how would that integration of digital literacy or, say digital citizenship may look like in the CSC curriculum, so we have more voices, more people actually talking about it, say young people, on these issues. And second would be to partner with Meta or, similar tech-based agencies. Like say, for example, in India, they have come up with a digital citizenship curriculum with an education board in India, which has components on, on what you can post on social media, what digital literacy could like, and other components. So how that can also be a possibility in terms of scaling, digital rights per se, because they are also looking from a very rights-based angle in terms of both responsibilities and what you have on these platforms. So how that partnership can perhaps look like, in scaling such interventions and doing more advocacy.
Yeah. Do you?
I run a platform called Agents of Ishq in India, which is sexuality. Obviously we face the same issues, but we are much less interested in promoting our content using ads because we think it sets up a false economy of, thinking you're reaching people, but we know very well what kind of reach that is. So we've actually been much more keen on thinking organically and finding ways around, but nevertheless, it's a fact that your reach does get controlled now in a competitive environment of content, right? But I just actually wanted to ask, so I agree with what Sylvie said, that I think there has to be a linkage with other digital rights questions, but also other questions of censorship. It's not like censorship was invented by Facebook, and it's not like governments are in a great hurry to end censorship. So, I just feel a little uncomfortable when we want to reach to the government suddenly to prevent something happening to us, which governments love to do to us. So I think that I'm not sure what the other ways can be, but I do think politically speaking, that is something to think about harder. I have been in too many boring Facebook policy consultations about censorship. And I really feel like every time I had a meeting at Facebook and wasted 1.5 hours discussing how this kind of content is very important to end violence, their policies got worse. So now my policy is to not really engage with them because life is short, right? But the thing is, it's true that even with Google, with YouTube, etc., we can't promote things like with words like abortion, queer. I mean, it's remarkable. We have a list of things. We have, of course, many screenshots of why ads are turned down. Many content creators do use spellings of sex like S:(X), but now that too gets turned down because it's something called like Meta gives you, Instagram gives you detailed reasons for why an ad was turned down, and I think it's very interesting to read through those, and it would be great, in fact, from a research perspective, because they have some kind of like a false, circuitous something when you use another spelling to get by. So I think they're very aware of what is being done. The other thing is that their own statistics and presentations when they want to like trot out some new tool they want us all to get on board with. It's interesting that their policy actually every single time censorship is much more on issues of sexuality and gender than on any hate speech, etc., etc. which they themselves are telling you. So I think this is all information that may be interesting at some larger level. Last of all, we spoke to a lot of people who work in digital marketing when we were confronting lots of issues with promoting some campaigns, right? And a very interesting thing that they told us, which I think circles back to the question of larger ideas of censorship and the political framing for this complaint against Meta, is that digital marketers saw an uptick in refusal of these ads after Jamila Jamil started speaking a lot about representation of women online. So the idea that when we are asking for protectionist policies, it almost always ends up making our space lesser is something to really keep in mind as we are articulating this thing. And I think I'm a little bit nervous that we are being protectionist in some of the demands we make, and what's the way that we can reframe this demand is my question.
Okay, thank you so much for these important questions. We're going to answer these first, and then we're going to go for more questions later. So, do we want to start with how can we work with content, or how do we work with content creators, and can we accelerate that work, increase that work? Jack?
Yeah, I can take this one, and then maybe people can answer whichever ones speak to them, such as the sex education ones you can take. I loved all of your comments, Sophia, and it's great timing because next we're doing research specifically into TikTok, and we'll be including creators in the evidence base for that, not just businesses. So would love to have your experiences in that. Carol's finishing her master's in public administration in Denmark, and her thesis will be specifically about TikTok and other platforms, and it will include content, not just ads. So it would be great to have your involvement. I love your point about how content creators can make research go viral, not just media outlets. And we want to prepare several months out so that the next time we release research, we can have amazing content creators like you sharing it on your large platforms. So loved all those ideas, and I can let others speak on the other topics.
So, Sophia, thanks for sharing that. And actually, Sophia and I connected almost a month back, I think, and I was watching one of her, she was on a panel at the World Health Summit, and I wrote to her on LinkedIn, and she was really quick to reply. So we did reach out to you in that sense, but I totally understand that perhaps it might not be a very proactive stance by a lot of other organizations to reach out to independent content creators. I do want to mention that in addition to the work we are doing here, R&W Media, in partnership with UNESCO, also runs a community of practice focusing on digital sex ed content creators. And Vitika is part of that as well. And the idea there really is exactly what Sophia was mentioning, to bring or have a space for to listen to the experiences of content creators, have a place for learning and sharing, build on each other's work, uplift each other's work, and also build on collaborations, connect them to different organizations. And as I mentioned in my presentation, also look at the mental health impact of what it means to be a content creator. And are there ways to offer sustainability to the work they do, especially if they're not affiliated to an organization. So I think that has been an initiative on our part, but as I was also mentioning in my presentation, I don't see a lot of conversation happening around digital content creators. So we really, really need to hold space for them, listen to their experiences, and see how we can really build a community of content creators that's able to offer solidarity, but also uplift each other in that sense. So Sophia, we'd be very happy to also listen to other ideas that you might have. On the question of, can we work with Meta on ad policy on looking at misinformation? Absolutely, and I actually feel like it is in their business interest. I think it all circles back to that these are companies for profit, right? They are working to generate profit. They're not here to work for rights issues or other social causes. So as long as we can make a case with them on why they benefit from it, I think there is a potential to really do that. And it also comes to how we are framing these issues then. So if we can make a case that, hey, Meta, it's actually important for you to have content creators because they're bringing your audience on your platform. It actually can be a really good way to understand, not just for content creators to use these platforms more effectively, but also for Meta to think about ways to address mis and disinformation. I think they've started to do that more in the political sphere because of such backlash that they've faced, whether it was in Myanmar or in the United States. But with SRH, I think we really need to visibilize the issue for them to then take it forward. And I think Center for Intimacy Justice, through their research, and other organizations through their individual level discussions with Meta have been doing that. But as I think Paramita was mentioning, like these are really boring meetings, and I don't think they're very interested in listening to us unless we have a case for them to say, hey, this is why, this is actually going to affect your profit margin. Like, this is why you should be investing in this. So I think that's also a question of framing and understanding how we can pitch this issue to them, that it creates an impact for them to, or incentivize for them to make changes. Yeah, I think there was another question on partnering with Meta. So yeah, I think I might have answered that. Yeah, and Paramita, I really agree with you. This question of censorship has to be really looked upon from a broader lens. And we are all working in now very restrictive settings in terms of how government is shaping these laws. I think there really needs to be a space, perhaps supported by donors and funders, and I think this, I had written in my notes, maybe we can learn some valuable lessons from the very well-organized right movement, right, that's leading or has strategized, for instance, to put in court justices in the Supreme Court of the United States, or even I recently heard they have a March for Life now in India. That was unheard of, but they're actually doing more anti-abortion advocacy work. So I think maybe it's for us now to strategize with that same emphasis and potency, right? To think about how can we strategize and confront their way of dealing with these issues. And I think it really needs some more deliberative thinking around how do we strategize, how do we communicate, because yeah, this idea of censorship is not just relegated to digital sphere, right? We're seeing what censorship is doing in India in terms of suppressing journalists and other creators, even in offline spaces. So I really do agree that we need more deliberate thinking and more proactive spaces to understand how can we combat this rhetoric from the right.
Thank you, Surabhi. I think we have room for one more final. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Ritika.
Very
Go ahead.
quickly, I just want to add to, of course, I don't want to be repetitive, but just adding to the fact that working with Meta, and what are the strategies? Well, to be very honest, there have been certain approaches which are very, very tokenistic, right? I mean, of course, all these companies are wanting to look really good and have something really nice, being supportive and all of that. I'm not going to name, but we have had a grant of $80,000 from one of the tech platforms as ads credit for last 5 years, and we have been able to use only $2,000 of it every single year. And I don't even know why they actually fund us, because we work on sex and sexuality and pleasure, and we are not able to use that money. But we have been listed, I mean, in their reports, they are doing good. They're doing social good. They're investing in us. And just this morning, we heard that we have received an ad credit of $5,000 from Meta. Now, of course, with the recent policy change, let us really see if this policy change is going to do any good, or is it just about a policy on paper, for which most part we know that it happens, right? We have all the policies, but they're rarely practiced. So I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind in terms of also working on policy with Meta is also to see, is this really working? Or is it just there because it looks good on papers and because we can be in a good meeting and just talk about certain things. So yeah, I mean, that's where things are.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that goes back to what Jackie said about challenging the algorithms to really see that this will change. We can take one last question from the gentleman in the back.
Yeah, thank you so much. Everybody hear me? Oh, cool. I really love the conversation that was happening about social media. And I love the perspective that all of us have for 2023. but maybe you guys might have more expertise than me. I happen to be a communications person. I create content. I do photography. I write. I do videography and all that. But in this space of SRHR. But I heard you guys talk about Meta so much, and you kind of, it was kind of like a center of focus. Of course, we're thinking about other medias like TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and all that, because we have to use all avenues as we can to make sure that the SRHR information goes to the public. But I wanted to give you a case scenario because I'm so interested in Meta and where I come from Uganda. Most people are on Facebook, I can say, though TikTok is kind of picking up so much since it's more of a video content and it's short video content and people can easily relate with it. And you know, lately the attention span among young people is really reducing, so people just want something that is of a click. So, but we happen to have our Facebook blocked by the government. I don't know if you guys have had that in Uganda. Yeah, Facebook was blocked by the government. But we are on Facebook. How? We use VPN to access Facebook, which is good. However, VPN affected our algorithm. So I can be in Uganda, but in order to access Facebook, I have to identify as someone who is in the Netherlands, right? Yeah, and Facebook is free and all that. So we are having that challenge. So as experts, I don't know how you guys can tell me, probably give ideas. Of course, I have some ideas that we have we already came up with, and of course, VPN was one of them and all that. To a point that even if you boost a post, it can't go to the directed audience because of VPN. So just asking anyone in the audience who might have more experience than me, how best do you think we can maneuver such an issue? Thank you so much.
What we're at time, so if people want to stay, they can stay. We in the panel can stay for longer, of course. So we'll happily take more questions and hear, you know, what you want to know and share your experiences. But you that have to leave, please feel free to leave. And we're so grateful that you came and attended our session. So I guess we can take you in the back. You had a question, right?
Show her, like, who still has a comment, just so we know.
Yeah.
And we
Okay.
can, so like 3. Okay. Cool. Thank you all so much for coming.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Cool.
So
Do you want to? You can use
Yeah.
the mic up here. Do you want to use this mic? Okay. Perfect.
Thank you for the amazing presentation. I'm from Love Matter Arabic as well, so I can relate to all of the censorship drama. I am the editor, so yeah, it's my daily life. I just have the feeling that maybe if we put the word censorship and Facebook and Twitter and Meta and ads and everything into a context in terms of like depoliticizing the internet as a sphere, I guess makes it look like one hegemonic space for all. We all experience the same thing. So if we convinced Meta to just let the ad be, we will be fine. But I guess there is a need to politicizing the talk about pleasure and politicizing the talk about digital space, and actually understand that how we understand digital and how our digital experience is being formed is totally different from one place to another. Sometimes for some countries, digital space is all the space that's actually available. And then it's also censored by many things. I mean, like even if Meta give us access to ads now, there are some content I won't be able to post because of many restrictions. And then for the funder or the donor or whoever, he wouldn't be understand what's the problem, why you are not like posting and talking about 1, 2, 3. So I guess there's more pieces of puzzle that need to be added to the conversation about censorship if you want to make it contextualized and relevant, and not to make it sort of like top-down approach one more time of top-down approach like Meta will let the organization, so the organization will tell the people, and that's it. It's very hierarchical. And also they talk about the importance of sex education to erase stigma and shame and da-da-da, but also doesn't take into consideration that from our experience in Love Matter Egypt, people want pleasure. They don't feel that much shameful. And they have a lot of things they are happy to do. I mean, like, they enjoy their life in a way. So actually, sometimes, putting the whole talk about sex education to, like, we're trying to help people to get over their stigma. Sometimes there is no stigma. There is, like, other more feelings. And this also another thing, like, how we add more pieces of puzzles into how one person formed the sense of sexuality and what's sexuality in a certain context, not in like a very broad, generic statement. And I guess speaking about digital justice could not be, I mean, like the example from Uganda is amazing example of how we are different. We have different experience, and we have very intersectional experience that depends on like the household, the economy, the da-da-da, a lot of stuff. So I guess talking about youth access to digital information has far more to be added, aside from just censorship and Meta and US companies and US lawsuits, because you can make a lawsuit, but then Facebook wants to still run in Egypt, for example, and in order to do that, they have to commit to certain things. So between that and between people right to digital access, they would actually prefer to still be working on Egypt because they could be easily blocked. So yeah, this is just like reflections on what happens. Thank you very much.
Can we take so if you ask your question and then you get up behind in line to ask, because we don't want to interfere with the poster sessions that's going on pretty soon. So if we can, thank you.
And I can kind of quickly say, just for if anyone is leaving in the next 4 minutes, or just get in touch with us afterward, because we'd love to, like I said, continue the collaboration. So you can reach out to any of our organizations. We're at partners@intimacyjustice.org and would love to meet others who are leaving. And yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, kind of two questions that are connected, but the first one is, I understand censorship and advertising is a really easy win in terms of starting those conversations, but I wonder what you guys are doing to talk about kind of censorship in general, especially like shadow banning. I don't know if that's maybe brought up in yeah, okay, it is. I would look forward to that in 2023 then. But I think along with that kind of bigger censorship issue, then the next question is, I think we know that a lot of these censorship pieces are put in place to kind of stop porn and adult content and other kind of sex workers from entering these platforms. And so knowing that that's maybe the scare, what's then this idealized version of these algorithms? Because I know R&W actually even did research sharing that, like, the porn searches and sex education searches share a lot of the same language. So then what does this look like? And I wonder if you've had any time to develop kind of what that idealized thing looks like or looks like. So. Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, those are like challenging questions, yeah.
Okay, so mine, it's not really a question, rather, I just want to insist when people are talking about content creation, they don't mention podcasters a lot. So like podcasting is also a thing. So I was so keen about Meta. They had an event, I think, recently. And I was seeing mostly, I don't know, maybe according to me, I only saw most people were TikTokers. So I'm just wondering, like, podcast is also a thing, and we also try to like tell these stories because they're also trying to advocate for SRH. So maybe anytime people are talking about content creation, you should also maybe try to like include podcasters, because I have a podcast, it's called Head Out Podcast, it's on Spotify, and we also saw Spotify kind of funded some content creators and they took podcasters. There were 4 podcasts from Kenya. They were funded by Spotify because they talk about SRH. So I feel like you should maybe also try to include that. So maybe when you want to see 2023, when the Meta event will be happening, I hope we will be included, the podcasters, and I hope I'll get a chance.
Thank you so much for that. So who would like to answer the
I just actually quickly want to respond to that. That's a very good point. Actually, Spotify has done some interesting work around promoting and like really being open and supporting, because we also, you know, sort of won a Spotify competition, and we have a podcast on CSE hosted by a teen in India. And it's interesting that some of these examples could be good examples for other companies to look at and follow. And of course, it's a different approach. Podcast is a world of its own, but again, content creation is such a broad theme, right? I mean, there's so many content creators who possibly not even seeing themselves as content creators, right? So I think we need to look at this bigger database of creators.
Thank you, Vidika. Jackie, would you like to respond to the former question?
Sure. On the shadow banning, absolutely. We didn't talk about it in the first report because we picked one thing so that we could have a clear impact on that area, but shadow banning will be part of the next research. And I'm also interested to talk to you more afterward about the idealized algorithms and sex work and porn. It's obviously complex, and we started with issues that we think we can have a clear win on first, such as, you know, menopause. We can get people on board with it, and then it becomes, you know, there's other stages to it for how inclusive you get. And so we've picked the ones first that we think we can have wins with. And then there's more specifics, of course, for where we can get support. And then I really loved the comments from Love Matters Arabic, and we're excited to learn from you. You have so much more expertise in the Egypt setting and other countries where we, you know, it's, you know the local landscape, and I really appreciate the perspective that there's censorship. It doesn't just come from tech platforms, it comes from other forces as well, and your thoughts on the top-down approach of like, let's not just ask Meta to like fix the problems for all of us. And I think it's important to support grassroots leaders in the regions where you have expertise, because I feel like that work in Egypt should be and can be led by people with greater regional expertise than we might have in California. So it speaks to the importance of us all working together and of funders funding the different pieces of it, because we all bring a different lens and yours is critical. And I'm excited to talk more with you.
Thank you so much. So I want to end this session with a call to action from all of you. So Surabi, would you like to start?
And we can be super brief for all.
Super brief, yeah.
Yeah.
I did actually already share my call to action, but it was more about, doing more inter-movement dialogue with digital rights spaces and SRHR spaces. And I think that might also address some of the points that have been brought forth by audience here. This was not exhaustive research, so it's just the beginning. I think there's a lot more potential to be actually explored how the censorship is contextualized in the broader context. And also, how can we think about alternative algorithms? Can we talk with developers and coders about that and building another alternative world in terms of addressing some of the complexities of why we even have such ad policies in the first place? And I just wanted to say to the woman who talked about podcasts, as a fellow podcaster, I totally hear you. And actually, it would be a really interesting subset of the research to look at what kind of challenges podcasters face from, separately from social media content creators, and also if there is censorship that podcasters are experiencing. Like we saw the case of, in the United States, but I think there could be a way to also do some evidence generation there. So,
awesome. I see signs from the room that they may need, but yeah.
Again, adding to the call to action, I very strongly feel that perhaps this is just start of a discussion, and I would really appreciate if people join the conversation with many more ideas. I think we are very limited in our thinking of what is possible, and the possibilities could be many, and I think we need to get a little wild. And I would feel that I think we need to open up the space really to get and crowdsource many more ideas on what could be done together. And perhaps we're not even thinking about it, right? So I think it's a whole world of possibilities, and we need to come together to think about all these possibilities. So please share your ideas.
Thank you so much. And just want to say, we want to make sure we have all of your contact information to include you and to work together on continued campaigns. So please, from our side, please find me or Carol so we can make sure you're a part of this database, and excited to work with all of you. And thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming to this session, and please come forward to us after the session and we can share contact information and get involved together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
I love speaking with you. You're so, everyone is so captivated. You have like such heart, like you're just such a channel.